Welcome to the Salience podcast, where we identify what stands out from all the noise.
In this episode, we will be discussing what it is like to support the transformation of a 100-year-old institution with close to 100,000 employees across different countries. With me today is my friend Ian Macdonald. On top of being an amazing person to work with, Ian has over 25 years of experience in areas spanning entrepreneurship, communication, leadership development, and strategy. He also has several creative specialties such as advertising, photography, and design. Ian is currently part of the people management area at Itaú Bank in Brazil, where he is head of applied complexity in the internal Transformation Consultancy. Ian is also a bilingual executive coach, consultant, and facilitator in complex adaptive systems. Based physically in Brazil, he has worked with a wide range of individual students, governments, and corporate organizations from varying sectors and sizes in Latin America, United States, Canada, Europe, and the Middle East. Ian is a digital complex facilitation wizard and also contributed to the design and implementation of the Itaú Complexity Lab, where he now works. Welcome, Ian, to the Salience podcast.
Thanks, Jen. It's an honor to be with you here, and always great to have a chat with you. So it's been many years. I haven't done the math, but we've had chats and had an amazing friendship for years. So it's great to be here with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. I'm always finding excuses to work and play with Ian. It's really great to get him on the podcast. And Ian, I say this with all my heart. You are a fantastic person. I have always learned so much from you. I feel like it'd be helpful for the audience to get to know you a bit. So could you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and how did you become who you are? You've had so many wonderful career changes and fantastic experiences.
I think likewise, Jen, it's been great. You've been a mentor and teacher in many ways as well. So I think it's a mutual dance we've had over the years. So it's great to be here. It's a strange. My lifeline is not very linear. It's a bit, I guess, complex to a certain degree as well. You know, I've British parents, but I was born in Argentina and just lived there for 30 days until I moved here to Brazil. Went to a British school here, so my first language is English. But Portuguese I'm very fluent, and most people can't pick up on my accent. So I'm sort of kind of fluent in two languages, which is a really interesting sort of gift by just having had the opportunity of having two languages has been really helpful. You kind of expanded what you could see and how you could read things. So this whole idea of translation is always present in my life. And when I graduated from school here, I went to Britain, where I decided to do a degree on agriculture and the environment. It was a passion at those times. It's one of those things that a teenager chooses. Then as I sort of grew into maturity at university, I became more and more in love with photography. And in those day and ages, it was still chemical, it was still analog photography. So all the process of developing and working with the negative, positive, and was sophisticatedly more interesting, I find, than just the digital. You have to really understand about light. You have to understand, and I just fell in love with it. It's kind of a sense of a past life experience. It was really, really easy to pick up, really dense photography books and just read them. It felt like meeting old friends, So photography became a big thing when I graduated. I've never planted a seed as a profession. I have to have the degree, but I went straight into photography, and that merged here in Brazil into advertising. Working with advertising as a photographer, and then I started my sort of career opening. I had my studio, and then I had a advertising agency, and then went through several advertising agencies. As a partner until after about 10, 12 years, I kind of had a moment of I have to rethink this. I don't know if I really want to continue the rest of my life, working close beside brands. I love it. I enjoy it. I think I'm kind of good at it. But, what am I going to do? And I was doing coaching and therapy and all these different things. And I got this invitation to join the HR department of the São Paulo subway. So I went from an entrepreneur to a civil servant in a blink of an eye kind of thing, which is really interesting. Just that shift, and moving into the São Paulo subway, which is a public company, and then that whole experience of being part of an HR and in the subway with about 10,000 people, and it's just amazing sensation of like, wow, I'm fascinated with being at the service of people rather than brands. So it was this shift from looking after brands to looking after people. And that project was short in the subway. It was about a year. And then I joined an executive who was shifting from being a top executive to having his own company and opening a consultancy, based around leadership development and expansion of awareness amongst leadership. How do you become a fully fledged leader and all that's involved in it? And so I helped him set up his company. And we had a client in New York that we were visiting frequently, and he would sometimes extend his stay and everything, and to catch a course or a workshop or something. And that's when he came across Dave Snowden. And that kind of blew his mind. And he called me up and said, geez, this is an amazing thing. He introduced us to the whole Kinevin framework and the SenseMaker tools, which is just amazing. And it kind of blew all of our minds and kind of never looked back to a certain extent. So we became very, very interested. We began doing more workshops. That's when I met Jen. Of course, she was met her as my first Kinevin masters. Doing courses with her and also getting closer to the SenseMaker tool. But not only the tool, we were fascinated about what builds it, like why is SenseMaker as it is, and of course it was kind of born and bred within Complexity, and that's why it is as it is, kind of. And then when I left that consultancy, I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time, and joined Jen and Michael Shevel-Dave time invited me to join Cognitive Edge right at the beginning of the pandemic. So we spent the whole pandemic amazing projects around the world, all online on Zoom, which is an amazing experience. Not just the clients that Cognitive Edge had at the time, but also how we could develop online training to try and bring the training that Cognitive Edge had in an in-person situation to online, which is just amazing. Of course, I guess the more you teach, the more you begin to learn. So we did so many of the Kinevin base camps so many times, and of course, I was facilitating Dave Snowden, and Sonia Blignan was also the CEO at that time. So all these amazing people were around me, and I just felt like this lucky sponge, absorbing all these great ideas and this great experience from people from all over the world. And then as Cognitive Edge shifted into a different sort of ways of working, gave me a bit more time to do sort of own clients here. And then I was asked by Alexandre Maimon to join. He had a consultancy here also. He's now the current CEO of Kinevin Company Brazil. So it's got sort of like where he's landed. But he was another consultancy. He invited me to be his director. And then that consultancy was bought by Itaú. Right. And that's how I migrated into the bank. Sort of like I got sort of a backdoor entrance because I wasn't interviewed to be part of. We were required. And there at Itaú, I've now been about just over 3 years and a couple of months. It's been an amazing journey because I joined as what they call a specialist. So just in the best sense of the word, just like a nerd, a geek, someone who's supposed to just go out there and bring content into the bank. No direct reports. You just have access to all over the bank, and you're just there to help sort of push the system forward with the expertise that you have, which was really, really cool to be able to just met so many people. It's a massive, massive institution with, hundreds of thousands of people. So I managed to meet a lot of people and do a lot of really interesting stuff, similar to what we would be doing over the last few years. And then about a year and a half ago, I was invited to set up, my own. It's not my own, but it's, of course, superintendency that focuses on what I was doing as an individual. So how can we replicate this on scale? Which is always a challenge. I've had so many conversations with Jen about, it's great on paper and it looks, so many of these complex ideas are really fascinating when you see them on a webcast, when you read a book about it. It's a great idea, so many amazing books, some of them behind me of like, I'd love to do this at the bank. But when you go to do it and then do it at scale, it's just like a whole other ballgame. So that's been a really fascinating journey of how to look at that. And of course, just by the sheer size of the bank and the number of people, the number of clients, and the importance within the Brazilian financial system. And I guess theoretically, they're on the stock exchange. They're also a major player in the stock exchange here. So then theoretically influencing the whole world. Everything's connected in terms of that. And so it's been really fascinating to be able to do that and learn how to sort of tweak. There's one thing about the reality, and the other thing is the maps. Like how can we map it, and what we do is always slightly different. So that's been an amazing learning and sort of journey and learning curve. And of course, bringing in all this, and we're always learning sort of new things all the time. It seems like a long answer, Jen.
No, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. I mean, it should be a long answer because I feel like in what you've shared, you have lived so many lives in terms of, this adaptability that you have shown, this openness to change, this openness to sort of allowing yourself to, and I want to pick up on an earlier point that you made about your bilingualism and how it is a gift because it is quite rare. And the point that you made is around translation and how it actually affords you very different ways of seeing and understanding and the perspective. And I wanted to expand on that a bit because, your adaptability through multiple careers, multiple turning points, and then, even now to interpreting the complexity of such a large system, right? I mean, maybe could you say a little bit more about that ability to translate, to be, I think, bilingualism, it isn't even quite right? It's just this openness, this polylingualism, the ability to adapt and enter multiple types of perspectives.
That's really interesting. Jen, we were doing, we had my team was here at home yesterday, and we did an exercise. We had our business partner with her, and I said, I don't want to facilitate anything. You do it. Just do whatever. I don't want to influence the system. And she brought this really cool, simple, we had spent half an hour sort of drawing our own timeline. And then, we drew the timelines, but from a professional, from our careers. Where were we in our careers? And then what values had we learned throughout those steps? And then what skills we had learned. So really simple, nothing major, but it's fresh to mind. So it comes to me. And it's kind of interesting how when we go to this space of connecting the dots, and Max Boisseau's, the model of, we think we know our story, and we connect the dots, and we have this nice little narrative, but it's just, quintillions of dots that we didn't even see that, of course, hugely affected us. We think, we were just standing there, but, so much could have happened while we were just standing there, that it's just this sense of awe into the possibilities. But going back to your point, which is interesting about translation, I think it's really interesting. For instance, a quick story. When I was at university, I made friends with students from Angola, who speak Portuguese, and I remember colleagues and even professors looking at me, and there's this, typically I look English, but I speak fluent Portuguese. And there I was talking to two African students and we were just chatting away in fluent Portuguese. Like, and they don't understand it. And I remember one time them raising their hand to make a question. And in Portuguese, things are the other way around mostly. So you kind of, instead of saying, how are you, you kind of say, are you how? Kind of, it's the other way around in most things. A lot, like so many languages, And they asked the question that it was just, and the teacher said, oh, I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. I was like, how can you not understand that question? It's just like, instead of saying ABC, he said BAC, all the elements are in his question. It's just some things are flipped around. Why can't you understand the question? And you're making him look bad, kind of thing. And the teacher wasn't trying to make him look bad. He generally did not understand. So I think so from a language perspective, it's really interesting that you kind of have this double approach thing all the time, of how you see things. There's always at least one way. There's a way you can see things. It's guaranteed. It's just the way you explain it. It's not even what's happening. Just how you explain what's happening. There's two approaches. So that's really helpful. And then going back to the exercise we did, I think with the photography was really interesting because when you push that button, like with digital, you kind of like really just push it and just choose the best one at the end. But with the chemical photography, you only have 36 frames and it's kind of expensive as a student. So choose wisely when you want to click the button. So you have to kind of think about what image you're trying to create. What are you trying to say with this image that you clicked? The kind of lens you use, where you focus, where you don't focus, whatever, are you going to go get light? It's to be dark light? All these questions that go into your mind as a photographer. You have to choose the image because the image will have a narrative. It will tell a story. So this discipline of choosing what to represent is also kind of in me in a big way. Jen, remember like the PowerPoint slides and everything, like one image, if we're going to talk about complexity, we're not going to just put, I don't know, lots of little dots. What are we talking? We're talking about how people interact. So choose that image because that image has an image. And then also tied up, which is interesting, is working with advertising and with clients. The clients have a certain pain or a briefing, and they want it to turn into a magazine ad, or they want to turn it into a TV ad, or they want to turn it into a radio ad, whatever. Or they want to communicate to their staff. How do you translate that into something that has a message, that has a moving forward? Because they only hire you because they can't do it themselves, right? At the end of the day, right? Because they want you to help them. So I think that also that effort to collect a brief, I think it's such a really interesting skill. And for those of you who are consultants, must do this kind of naturally. But who's never been a consultant and never had to get a brief, translate that into that and deliver value back. That's also an effort in translation. I think that's really interesting. And lastly, working with Dave. I mean, so you've been with Dave. I mean, Dave is really sophisticated language. I always joke, and he knows I've said this to him. He's not friendly with commas and full stops. He's not. Those are not his friends. So he has long sentences with sometimes multiple issues and stories. You always need a dictionary with Dave because he has a very sophisticated vocabulary. But I find it such an interesting exercise in reading difficult books. Just one book that he always, where is it? This one. You want to blow your mind, Radical Sacrifice. Dave always goes, I feel like an idiot reading this book because it's so sophisticated and so many smart, interesting philosophers and writers and everything in that book. But it's a fascinating exercise to how do you make this, to distill this into something that's not simpler, but just perhaps more synthetic in this big, what's the synthesis that you can create, So I guess it's kind of a strange way of how to answer this, but I recognize it's not just the language, but the idea that how do you hold these different ways of expression and communicating and try and bring them into a sense that helps people, that sort of makes sense of the craziness that we are living in. And it's just it's just my perspective. I'm just one translator. In an ideal world, we have so many cool chats I've had with Jen that she translated from her culture, her background, her languages, and her experience, and she translates things in a different way. It's like, that's really cool. I hadn't translated it that way. So I think that we sometimes get lost in translation, but sometimes I think it's to quote the film, but I think it's always a really cool way of approaching things, understanding that there's multiple interpretations of reality all the time.
I love that. Thank you for that. I mean, that was just so beautifully put. And I tried to capture some of these points. And I think, some of the things that you spoke about, like the ability to, sort of understand that meaning can emerge differently by connecting the messages in a very different way, right? Because you realize that language can present in different forms, and through the different forms, they generate sort of very subtle differences in interpretation, and somehow you're able to see that. You talked about how in real photography, I'm going to put it, not digital, right, where you're dealing with 36 frames and having to figure out how much exposure, so on and so forth, what chemicals to use, right? That you recognize the importance of composition, right? It's what to include, what not to include, and also like almost like a visual semantics. How do you put it together so it conveys something that is evocative of what it is you're trying to translate, and sort of also just this ability to see and connect and synthesize differently. And I feel like those are skills that really predisposes one to being able to manage and understand complexity a little bit better. And so, I mean, my question to you is, you now work in a large bank where you mentioned earlier you're trying to scale, applied complexity, and you're finding that it isn't quite as straightforward. So what does it mean for you to apply complexity in the work that you do, and what are some tips and tricks you might give to somebody who is maybe not bilingual, who hasn't been quite exposed to this different ways of seeing, and what are some ways that has worked for you in some of the work that you're trying to do?
It's interesting that you just said that. It just sort of rung to me this the recognition that I'm fortunate to have that. So I kind of like just have that. I can't remove it, but I think what's and I haven't ever verbalized it this way, but a lot of what we do in the bank is kind of how can I and I've not done this not done this consciously. A lot of the methods we do is almost and a bit like we just discussed how cool it is to get together is we see so little individually of even if it doesn't matter how many languages, even if you speak 12 languages, you still see very little on your own. So a lot of what we do is how can we get people together, and get them talking about things in a different way. So if we can get people to sit down, preferably not even sit down, stand up. We can talk more about, the extended mind in a little while, which is kind of sort of a cool new sort of pet project, is how we use the body as well. But like, how can we get people interacting with each other's in ways that they don't normally? And a lot of through this sometimes is just ritualized methods. Do this for 5 minutes, change this. You kind of get people, get them a bit lost, get them following us in terms of steps. And also the people we invite, don't invite the regular people, invite some different people, invite people who aren't part of your department, invite people who don't know about credit cards, invite people who, don't know about risk, or if you're not invite some people about risk, invite some legal team. So we call them our godparents here. I say just invite some godparents, because godparents are always the coolest, right? They're the ones who've chosen to look out for our kids if something happens, or when we get married, these are the ones going to help us out when we get, if we go through a tough time. So our godparents here, and we have the masculine and feminine, the padrino and madrinas here. And here in weddings usually have more than just the best man and best lady kind of thing. So who are you going to invite? Who are your godparents? They're going to come here. They'll help you oversee it and where you're at. And they're going to give you their 2 cents. So what, it's a bit like therapy always, like, Jen, what aren't I seeing? And if you were me, what would you do? And I'll listen to that. So, and then you get all these different perspectives. And it's, kind of give goosebumps, because I do not know after 3 years of a single experience where people haven't had aha moments, like, geez, that's kind of interesting, and then after that, what happens is a lot of people say, oh, Ian's team, they do team building. I don't like that. here kind of thing. I guess he said, well, but I let it ride. And why do they call what we do team building when we're doing applied complexity, and we're doing, all these experiments? I think because they experienced the sense of it being just cool to talk to people. The output, people, we call it sometimes to help support strategy, which is really great. Strategy in a bank, this is, this is kind of core, this is great. But they leave the experience having a sense that it was like a day out. And we got to be together, we laughed, and we talked about things we don't normally do. And most of them at the end of the day, we should go and grab a beer. Let's go. They want to extend the experience, because our belief is that, it shouldn't be a PowerPoint experience. It's about how can we create experience. So we're really careful with the setup and the music and the smell of the place, the food we serve, all these little details, so that we actually try and create a space for people to interact in a really cool way. I think I love Anne Pendleton Julia's book, Design Unbound, which is this sort of sense of the architects of possibility. So how do we design the best possible situation and circumstances that get people out of their norm in the safest possible way, so they don't feel threatened, so they can talk about things in a way that they don't feel threatened, their identity doesn't feel threatened, their sense of their jobs don't feel threatened, that they can talk about ideas and descriptions and not their opinions of things. And so that has been really, really positive, is how can we get people to be describing? And we, the geek term here is, the descriptive self-awareness. So how can we get them to do that without asking them to be descriptive and self-aware? But they leave at the end of the day more aware and having done a really good job at describing where they are. And let's see, for those of you who know, it's like, well, that's obvious. Well, that's it. That's all you need to do. You don't have to. You have to move into the complexity of a jungle or a forest, or step into the ocean to feel the ocean. You can't. There's this point when you start describing like wave functions and stuff. It's really great, but it's not going to help you learn to surf any better if you just describe that. How can you get in and sort of get wet and smell the forest and feel the complexity of different perspectives? So I feel my answer is long. If no other, but they can use this podcast to fall asleep gently at night.
No, it's fantastic. And I took just so many notes. I love how you described it, that it's possible to simulate that ability to see and understand differently and connect things differently by really looking to connect the system very differently, right? Be it through bridging new relationships and connections, or through structuring new exchanges so that the emergence will be different. And I mean, the thing that I'm most sort of taking away from this is, a lot of times organizations talk about capability building and development, and there is this focus on just the very formal training component. And, in our trainings, we take a very similar approach. It's not really new content or information that is necessarily given or delivered to them, but it's structuring a new process of discovery. And it's sort of mobilizing connections within, or new connections as capability. It's mobilizing more awareness as capability. And I think that what you've described is so powerful. It's beautiful. I love how you put it. I don't know
if you or the listeners here with us have kind of thought about it, but it strikes me that I heard this one, there was a podcast or someone who wrote that, has the pandemic ended? It's like, because perhaps the most, to me, apart from, of course, all the lives that were lost in the pandemic, we kind of downgraded our social skills and our social ability. And I think we've trivialized the impact on ourselves and our families and our societies. We've lost those people skills. People don't parties in the same way, and some really strange. I've seen some strange behaviors at sort of gatherings and parties. Like, geez, that's a bit odd. People like don't kind of like misbehaving, they kind of like losing it a bit. And we see around the world sort of an increase in sexism and racism, and this things are more polarized. It seems we've forgotten our basic skills of how to interact. So it's almost like, well, it's a bit like having spent 2 years away from the gym. Well, we have to start at the beginning again. You have to stretch, to walk. You have to sort of, don't get the weights you're picking up then. You just go gently or you'll hurt yourself. So I think that's part of these exercises is also almost a bit like social gym. Like how do we get back to talking, and how can we get back to exchanging, and how can we deal with conflict and having different opinions and divergence. The social media is not too good for the gray space. You either like it or you dislike it. Or what do I like? I just like, there's no symbol for, I like parts of it, but not others, and there's another part I'm confused, and there's another part I just didn't understand. We don't have these multiple sums at different levels to give us a better reading. We just have to do this binary, like or silence, which basically will work. We'll read it like whatever. They don't even like, dislike, comment, nothing. They just read it and just discard it. So we have to kind of help and push ourselves as well into these kind of discussions.
I love it. Social gym. I think that's a thing that all organizations should actually look to creating a gym for your social skills. I think that's a fantastic idea. I want to pick up on what you spoke about earlier. I know you're doing something around The Extended Mind. It's a great book. And I know you're applying some of these concepts in your work. Could you maybe chat a little bit more about that?
I really like it, and I highly recommend the book. It's beautifully written, and a third of it or something like that ridiculous is just like notes of big biography. It's such I really admire the scientists that like just dive in and just have this power of reading so much and then trying to make sense of it for us. So I'm very grateful for the author. And right at the beginning, she brings some data from some research, and I forget the name, forgive me, but it's I think it's out of Oxford or Cambridge, but it's a British study based on interviewing and talking to traders in the New York Stock Exchange, and then trying to get them to understand how they make decisions and everything. And one of the things that they've noticed, which is really interesting, that sort of like the more successful traders have this that interior sense and awareness. Again, I forget right now. I'll remember it some moment. I'm terrible with some of these things, but it's like an awareness of like an insight.
Interoception.
That's it. There you go. Nothing like a smart person that finally.
We teach that in our training at Frontline Mind. Yeah. That's why it came up to me.
There you go. So I think it's really good, this perception of what's happening inside, and those that are the better traders have this, so they can kind of like, tap your heartbeat on the table right now. They're like, give it a couple of seconds, and they'll start tapping their heartbeat on the table. And they're surprised that you don't. Like, how come you don't know what you're eyeing? It's only like when you've got a headache or, something's happened, and then you can kind of feel it, or you've just, you've done exercise and your heart's really throbbing. Then they could feel it, but otherwise, like, it's just there, So we bring that story in. So like we talk about traders in New York Stock Exchange, you get everyone's opinion, everyone's attention. Okay. And then we say like, there's this exercise, there's a social gym. I said, there's this, this interoception gym, right? And one of it is just, based on, he's somewhere behind me, John Kabat-Zinn's book, and his research about mindfulness. But I thought what's really cool, and people really liked the bank, is this sense of do the typical body scan. So we start off joking, we just choose two toes, the big toe on the left and the big toe on the right. So we start off many of our workshops with just give me 5 minutes, just bear with me, and let's do this. So, close your eyes, take a breath, wherever, focus on your left big toe. And it's so specific, right? Like, what do you feel? Is it hot? Is it cold? Can you feel the texture of your socks if you're wearing them? If you're wearing sandals, can you feel the coolness of the air? Can you feel a nail? Can you feel a nail on your left toe? Does it need to be cut, or how's it doing? What's happened? Can you feel the toe next to it? Can you rub against it, or is it separate? And they just focus on their breath, go back to it, and afterwards they do the right, same thing. So it's like, I don't know, 6 minutes. That's it. And then we just like, what was that like? And they kind of giggle and laugh. And I said, and ideally do the whole body, with lots of care, but with this description. This holding of a description, I think goes ways back around tying up. It's great, this chat is, the whole translation thing. So you're actually helping people learn, like, translate what you're seeing. Don't just look at it. What are you seeing? How do you see it? Because I went to the Grand Canyon. It's great. Oh no, what? Just more. Give me more. It's not just great. It's breathtaking. Great. Where is it breathtaking? Why is it breathtaking? What took your breath away? Is it the same as someone else? So this capacity to describe it, and it really gives focus. And a lot of people said, like, just last week we did this, and someone said, I'm terrible at meditating, and my mind always goes berserk thinking about everything I have to do. I'm always on overdrive. So when I sit down, it just kind of makes me worse, because I just realize I'm terrible at meditating, and B, I just my checklist for the day seems to be even bigger, just because that's all I could think about. But this exercise of focusing on the body and naming it gave something for my narrator to do. It's almost like, giving the kids Lego. You go give your mind some Lego, so it's really interesting about that. And people begin to think like, oh, I'm going to start doing this, giving this, and this ability, to make sense of what the body is sensing is, part of sort of sensing in complexity. Our minds are great, but at the acceleration of AI and acceleration of, the internet and the world in general, we kind of, need help from other departments if we're going to kind of not burn out, because I think everyone's putting they're betting all their chips on the brain. That's not the only place that we make our decisions. So I think it's a really interesting approach as to how we bring in just very little, because we don't want to be named sort of like, tree huggers and stuff like that, because the bank is, a serious place, and we've got a lot of very smart people doing very concrete, objective work. So we tread lightly, but we've had really good sort of feedback from bringing in these little things, and more we know with the rising mental health concerns, we're trying to make it almost like we'll start every time, whenever, at least with 5 minutes of just grounding, breathe, connect to your little toes. Like we call it like the pinky exercise, kind of connect to the toes. And it's just enough to bring people into a different sort of state for the rest of the day.
I like that. That's beautiful. I am very encouraged, and I think that the listeners will be as well, that a bank as large as Itaú is actually encouraging the importance of embodied thinking, and the impact of your senses and your ability to sense and actually then interpret that on decision making and your ability to perform at your job, right? Like that connection is very clear. I want to pick up on another point that you made, and this is something I do really want you to talk about, because you mentioned AI and how it's hijacking a lot of our sense making, but there is also a way for us to through a better understanding of our sensing, recognize what we're able to make sense of, and then in partnership with us, what AI can support us with, right? Because I know you're starting to utilize a lot of AI in your work in the transformation space. Could you share a little bit about that, and also some of the patterns and trends that are emerging that you see?
The bank is massively interested, right? And this is public, right? We're the third largest GitHub AI Microsoft user for Microsoft, right? So just over the last sort of few months, over 1 million lines of code have been written by AI in the bank. So it's a huge investment. We're taking it really seriously and using it to how we can customize more and more the experience we have 60 million clients. So how can we try and use that to create not only a better but a more customized experience for our individual clients? And of course, there's huge learning curves and everything to go along with it. from our sense, we've had some really interesting results and also some frustrating ones. When the gets to points, and what the frustrating ones are when we try and get perhaps it's a matter of more practice and more help with the prompt design. But prompt design is difficult, and I find that, for instance, if you look at a typical complexity map, so be it Sonia's Wayfinder or Mastery map from Dave Snowden's or Future Backwards or any of these maps, which are great in terms of people picking up on it. The bot's not too good so far. They kind of lose it. They kind of flip out. They trip it. And what I find frustrating so far with my experience is the level of self-confidence that the bot has. If I can describe it, it never says like, I don't know what you're saying. Can you do that again? I don't know. I don't understand what you want. It'll just give me something and wrap it in good English or good Portuguese. So if you're not paying attention, it just spits stuff back at you in different words, and you think like, which a human wouldn't, right? They'd say like, I don't know what that double take, like, well, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying, and I don't think my answer is going to help you out. I'm just waffling. And then, if you know that just in English, that's very British. So that so-and-so just waffles on. This is pre the pancake mix, right? That's like, he's just going on. It's just blah, 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 but in a nice way, and then you say, that's just blah, blah, blah. That's not any value. And then it apologizes. Oh, sorry. How about this? And it sometimes gets worse, or you fall into the trap. Now, that's better. And it's not better. So I think looking at patterns, looking between the lines and seeing potential and possibility is challenging for humans. It's challenging, blows your frontal cortex out the door. It's an effort. It requires energy of ours. We're burning we're burning brain matter in a good sense. We're really getting how to make sense of it. So I'm looking for multiple connections at the same time, testing coherence for those connections. And I'm not fully convinced about the way AI does with that. However, if you have 10,000 stories written by people, and then you can say like, can you read these 10,000 stories? I've only got a couple of minutes, and bring out, some patterns you see in terms of themes, perhaps language. So this consolidation of what was in the past I think is really good, really fast, and much better than my bias, because I'll only be able to read 9 in this time, and I'll miss out another 9,000 stories. So large volumes of data, especially when, I think a lot of I'm speaking very ignorantly, a lot of the chat, GPTs and everything work well with sort of, flowy text, when we try and consolidate and like, we map it out and we tell it that these Post-it notes are from this, or these Post-it notes are this, and try and make sense of this. We try and order our complex facilitation to help the bot make sense of it. There's where, that's where I get lost in translation. I realize I can't explain the process. There's a part that maybe it's my poor language skills, so like, I can't explain a whole cluster of Post-it notes too well. No. However, polarity management, the framework by Barry Johnson, there's so much on the internet and so much that you can just take a picture of the framework filled out, send it to the bot, and it'll return a wonderful sort of narrative and convert that framework into this really cool narrative of what can be done and what can't be done and everything. It's like, that's amazing. You can double check it and it's all there. So maybe some things are better than others. So and so we're testing, and but we go in carefully, and we see the AI as a support, as a buddy, but there are some things that are very careful with. And what's most concerning, I turned 50 yesterday. And it's interesting, the sense of 50, it was like half a century. And it's not like someone sent a picture of a century, like a guard century cut in half, like half a century. So my half a century, and it's interesting the impact of half a century. But I see the younger, just by experience, the younger members of the team, we have a member of the team who's 25, so exactly half. And she's great, amazing experience, wonderful facilitator. But people at that age level, just by the level of experience, I reckon the ChatGPT can fool faster because they are still learning and looking at the world. And I think just the experience is really interesting. That we talked to, that the years give us experience of picking up signals and patterns that perhaps are not so available to those who are young. It's just a matter of time. It's just having seen millions more patterns than anyone else. So I think this is experience, and therefore I'm wary of the fact that so many things are in the minds and hands of the younger generation, which is brilliant and really cool, and it should be. But also, I don't know how many of them it's one of those, you don't know what you don't know. So I think that's also the thing we have to be careful with. And perhaps also the diversity of teams. You should have the old skeptics and the old cynics and some of as part of these teams that are testing the system and making it more robust. So I don't know how many of how for giving value to those who have more years in experience as being sort of testers and questions and raising the bar in terms of expectations.
Wow. I took note as always. What I'm hearing is the human technology interface is really that human capability to realize that we don't know, and to realize that as confident as the answer seems, that there's something off about it, right? And it's, that there is strength in utilizing, LLMs or AI to actually scan retrospectively for recurrent patterns, but not to ask it projective questions about, things that are unknown. So it's really good with dealing with knowns, right? That's what I am taking away. And for me, that links back as well to what you spoke about earlier, which is the embodied aspect of decision making, because that gut that my spidey senses tells me something, right? That comes through the embodied. Right, it's not necessarily 100%, cognition in the brain power sense of the word. So, I really like that. I thought that was a really nice way for us as humans to connect, right, those two dots, which you're so good at doing. You're helping us connect the dots. Yeah. So, Ian, I am mindful of time. It's been fantastic. I would like to give 3 salient points that I took away before I would like to ask you one more question. But what I took away is the importance of different ways of seeing, perspective, framing, the ability to translate, synthesize, and present differently. That's one of the things that I think is really important as we navigate into an increasingly uncertain world. What I heard as well is recognizing that capability for organization goes beyond just thinking about the traditional ways. It's also around connections as part of the capability. How do we bridge new connections, bridge new awareness? And that links for me to this aspect of understanding and, re-emphasizing the importance of feeling into ourselves, the embodiedness of decision-making and thinking, and how we then go on to partner with some of these new technologies and to then enter those relationships more mindfully. Those for me are three summary points. And before I let you go, I really like to understand you've already done so much and you're already doing so much. What is next for you? What are you most passionate about at the moment?
It's I've said this several times, and as a publicly traded company, we're very wary of our costs, right? Having 100,000 people is very, very expensive, and because some of our competitors, born in a digital sense, apparently seem more efficient. So their cost of serving is less than us. Fine, fair enough. Let's be efficient. We should evaluate where we're costs and everything. But I think there's a really interesting, and this is I nag at. I don't know of any company yet that has really tapped into the potential of having every single one of their employees as part of a network of innovation and sensing, making sense of the world. So how do we imagine if we had 100,000 sensors actively sensing what's happening in the world, what's happening in the bank, what's happening in each department, would be phenomenal. And then imagine if our 60 million clients likewise told us what is happening in the world. So if we could network those sensors, those humans who are experiencing every single day their lives in different ways, we would create amazing products, and even more amazing products, and even more amazing services. And we would be attuned to what, the Brazilian population needs even better, and theoretically, the Brazil, we could share that and the world. So theoretically, my next step is a bit naive, perhaps, or maybe grandiose, to the sense that, banking is everywhere. Everyone uses banks. It's just like as much as electricity, So I'm enchanted and in awe of the luck of having landing in a place that is an institution that is so used. So if we can improve at how we make sense of the world together, perhaps we'll be, the long term exchanging much more value than money to a certain extent, which is really important. But in terms of exchanging, we have this. There seems to be a really cool building block that where banking can go to in terms of solving the really intractable problems that we face. So I hope there's time in this lifetime to do that. But I mean, that's kind of the next step, is how can we move into networking the humans better? So that's it.
I wouldn't expect anything less from you. It's wonderful ambition. And I have really, really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Salience podcast. Please leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Frontline Mind newsletter by visiting our website at frontlinemind.com. Have you got a topic you would like some more salience on? Send us a message on LinkedIn or email team@frontlinemind.com.